Okay, I'm gonna make a video on the topic of energy in dog training. If you watched any episodes of The Dog Whisperer, if you're familiar with the work of Cesar Millan, then you know that one word that he uses quite a bit is energy, right? And how your energy affects your dog's behavior, and how energy is basically one of the big things that is responsible for how your dog behaves in a given environment. And the reason I want to talk about this topic is because it's something that as a dog trainer I've heard quite a bit from clients, I've heard it from peers, and I've heard it from students as well, right? What about the whole thing with energy? And my view over the years on the topic of energy has evolved. It started with, wow, what is that? This is before I was a dog trainer. What is that? Is that a thing? Does that actually, is it that important? Then I became a dog trainer. I started to research more on the topic of operant conditioning, classical conditioning, and then I started to realize that dogs learn in a much more complex way, and they behave in a much more complex way than energy could explain. But then as I matured and grew as a person, as a human being, I started to also change my views on the whole concept of energy. So I went from what is that to I became a dog trainer and I really studied dog training. And then my view on energy was very cynic. It wasn't anything that I attributed anything to. It was just it's just BS. It's just crap. It's not real. And then as I matured, as I grew as a person, my view on energy, in general, not just the dog training, but in general, this is, my growth as a person gave me a different lens into what energy actually is and how it does affect everything in my life. At least that's how I feel. Everybody has their own belief about what life is, but if you understand quantum science, if you have a grasp into what quantum science is, then you know that we're made of more than just the physical, and that there is a lot more to what we don't see than just this Newtonian view of life. And naturally it does, to me as a person, it does bring it back down to dog training, just dog ownership, and just living with dogs in general. And so now my view on this whole thing, and the way that I feel people become much more connected with their dogs and with the process of dog training, is that there is more. If you understand it, whether it's rational, consciously or subconsciously, you start to notice, you start to pick up on little things. The people that I notice have that connection with their dog, it's interestingly enough, are competitors. People who compete with their dogs because their dogs are not just their pets that go to the bathroom, they take for a walk, and then they go back inside and they just live with the dogs. These are dogs that these people are thinking about and working with constantly. In any serious competitor, in any sport in any dog sport that you observe, that and that you watch, you'll notice that there is this really tight connection between them and their dog. Now, they may or may not articulate it as an energy connection, but you can certainly see it. You can see it in the way they behave around their dogs, the way they train with their dogs. And it's almost like them and their dogs are very, just on the same page. It's almost like they're thinking the same thought. Almost. I don't want to get too mushy about it. I don't want to get too irrational about it either, and too fluffy about it. But just to give you an example, my dog Rust, this is just a personal example, and I'm sure there is an operant reason behind it. But when I give him certain cues, and you might have noticed this too if you're somebody who competes, that there are certain things that I tell my dog. So I'm thinking about a cue, and when I say it, like before I even finish saying it, or even just as I start saying it, my dog beats me to the punch. So I'll say, if I'm doing change of positions, I'll say sits, and just as the word is leaving my mouth, he's already in that position. So if I say sits, he's already on there before I even finish saying it. It doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen. Before I finish saying the down cue or the other cues, it almost feels as though he's thinking the same exact thought that I'm thinking, that I'm about to say. I'm not saying that this is not operant. I know that there are things that go into it. I know that there's my pattern, right? When I give certain cues, he picks up on that. I understand that. I know that there is auditory cues where even if I don't finish saying it, but it sounds like I'm going to say it, I know my dog picks up on that. So I'm not blind to that, to how smart and how sophisticated dogs can be in their learning. I understand that. But there are certainly occasions in which I just can't help but think, wow, how did he know that? And I experienced this also with with coworkers, people that I've been working with for a long time, that I work with very tightly, and this is a very common occurrence too, where people, you say something, and just as you say it, the other person goes, I was thinking the same exact thing, right? Or you're thinking something and the other person says exactly what you were thinking. This happens to me with my wife. This happens to me with people that I work with very closely. So there is certainly this, energy connection, right? This connection between you and somebody you live with and you're very close to, or you work very closely to. And I know from personal experience, I've experienced similar instances with my dog, and I've watched other competitors go through something very similar. So to me, I'm at a point in my career and in my life where I attribute more to the word energy in dog training than I used to. There's definitely more than just energy. I believe the dog whisperer kind of sold it a little bit too much, and people just ran with it without really understanding that there was more to it. So it's just something that I wanted to share, and maybe you have experienced the same thing. I know if you compete with your dog, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There are some instances in which you and your dog are so connected that that things happen without you being able to rationalize how that happened. So just something I wanted to share, and let me know if you have experienced something similar.